Welcome to the Not So Corporate Updates. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about company sizes, something Mike was particularly interested in. He has revealed himself to be a corporate shill, and John has some interesting viewpoints as well, I think. I don't know, John, what was it you said?
John, co-CEO. Thanks, Peter, co-CEO. We covered a lot of good base points for this quarter. It was very strong. Tune in. You'll learn a lot.
I showed my alter ego today. I'm normally railing against capitalism. Today I'm defending it. Womp womp.
But our financial outlook looks strong, and we're definitely going to rally in the current macroeconomic environment. So thank you, guys. So 150 people apparently is the maximum number that other people that an individual can have a relationship with. And apparently something weird happens when companies hit that size. There's an article here from Quartz magazine. I don't know, Quartz website that talks about it.
I've heard other versions of that stat. Like 150 actually sounds like it's on the high end. I think I've heard people say 100 or 50 even of people that you can actually have like personal relationships with.
My number's about 7.
So
yeah.
I have regarding like startups, I've heard varying numbers of this stat, and it's always like basically when you reach this threshold, whatever the number is when you go from a family to a like actual corporate environment.
Yeah.
And I think every startup that succeeds will go through this change of like first it's the founders, then it's the first hires, then it's the secondary hires,
right? As long as
exactly. You just have to kind of, because you can't run a successful company. Maybe you can, but generally speaking, you kind of had to conform to what the investors want, and now you have a board that's dictating, and then eventually you have shareholders, and you have to conform to the standard of like, well, this is how the world works. This is how the world plays. This is how you're going to play.
It's weird that is basically most people's goal, is to get to the point at which you have to compromise on your principles. Like for money.
Why do you say that, sort of, Peter?
Why?
You get to the point that you have to compromise on your principles. Why is that true?
Well, because so okay. Maybe I should put a what do you call it? Addendum here, or extra bit. That so many of these startups begin by saying we're a family, we're close, we've got a flat management structure. But the goal is to get past that, right? All these things that they kick off with are the sort of core values that are really important and are a selling point of why you would go work for this company. But then at a certain point, it's like you want to get past that point. And we're saying that pretty much every company, once they get past a certain point, has to abandon a lot of these principles.
Yeah, but they want to hold on to those principles.
But
right. But
no, money. They don't. If it's basically a law that you have to at some point at a certain size, and you also want to make money and grow as the guiding principle of any company, then you're saying that, well, not out loud, but you're saying that at some point we're going to abandon these principles because, well, we want to grow to $1 billion company or a $10 billion company. So that means is the unsaid bit is we want to grow to the point where we don't consider each other,
where we don't know each other,
where everybody's a cog in the machine.
And specifically, the point this article's making is that at that point, you need, as an organization, more structured decision-making processes and supervision and like organizational structure, and that increases the management overhead and slows the company down until you kind of can break through that and get to the point where your Facebook laying off 9,000 people because it's going to make you more money.
Yeah. I don't know. It's kind of there's one guy, I think I've talked about him a while ago, but his name's Matteo. Oh God, I've forgotten his name now. He runs a company called Pinboard. He goes by the username Idlewords online, and he runs Pinboard was like an alternative to it's like a bookmarking service, it's very simple. You install an extension, you bookmark it, and it's available all across lots of different places. And you can archive pages, and it's like a service where that saves your bookmarks. It's very simple. But he has enough users to bring in about $200 or $300 a year, and he's happy with that. He says, okay, he runs it on a server. He maintains the server himself. He does upgrades every now and again. He's not looking to turn it into a mega corporation. I don't think it could ever be. But it's so refreshing to see someone who's like, yeah, this is cool. I'll stick with it,
Yeah.
I wish that was more of a...
There are thresholds like that in most businesses, though, like getting to the point where you can hire your first employee as a threshold, getting to the point where you've got 3 to 5 people and you can have about $1 million in revenue, then getting from there to $5 million, getting from 5 to 10, from 10 to probably 50, which is now, that 10 million to a 50 mark. Somewhere in there is when you're going to hit the 150 employees. And at each stage, you kind of have a choice. Do I want to push through this, or am I happy where I am? And I think there are a lot of businesses that go both ways.
Is there a choice, though? I mean, yeah. I don't think I've ever heard of a company that said, we're going to stick at 50 employees.
It depends on... So I think it depends on if the company is bootstrapped or if the company has taken external funding.
Yeah.
As soon as you've taken investment...
Yes.
From an external source, you now have to experience a bunch of pressure from them to grow and multiply their initial investment.
For sure.
Well, that's true. The whole thing about being responsible to you, having a fiduciary responsibility to your board is like it's. Oh no, I was going to make a comparison there, which I know I shouldn't. It's like it's used as an excuse to wash away a lot of evils. A lot of shitty behavior is often hand-waved with, well, we have a fiduciary responsibility to the board. That we had to fire Julie because the board just,
gave us no choice.
Yeah, well, there's some reality to that, though.
What do you mean?
Sometimes they are forced to do that because of pressure from investors. Like the person who controls the money controls the business.
They don't really. The people who are doing the firing often don't actually give a shit. They're like, they agree with
this. Is where I think this is where that whole shared responsibility, which kind of equals no responsibility, happens, right? Yeah. So the board says, well, you just got to do this, and you say the board told me I have to do this, and now who is really to blame?
Yeah.
Well, so the decision in that case is how much the CEO wants to put himself on the line to not do it, right?
Exactly.
Like if they say,
CEO has to do it.
Well, could fight it, but then they're putting themselves on the line.
Out. Right. Yeah. Exactly. So it's
how much do I care about this? Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think my impression is that a lot of the time the CEO would have done that as well, and probably the CEO is sitting on multiple other boards which are doing the same thing.
Yeah, very true.
So very much of a circle jerk there, I think. At least that's my opinion. I don't know. Maybe I'll be a CEO one. In fact, as CEO of this podcast, unfortunately, gonna have to make some changes.
Have some redundancy.
Some more changes.
That's co-CEO to you. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like I'm generally more cynical about business, but I'm kind of on the side of the CEOs for this one.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, all right then. Is that just because you're in the board's pocket? I mean, Jesus, Mike.
Yeah, I'm a shill for private equity.
So a friend of mine, I mentioned this before as well. A mate of mine he's a consultant or a contractor, and he told me this thing years ago that he writes into his contract that both parties have to be genuinely not concerned or interested. They have to care about each other, basically, and they have to not just pay. I don't know exactly what the wording is, but it's basically when you say how you're doing, it's not just you have to actually care about the answer. And at first I was like, what? How could you be put that in a contract? Why would you do that? And he said, well, we put all sorts of other responsibilities that are difficult to, uphold in contracts. Adhere to. Thank you. Yeah. And we put all these other things in there. Why shouldn't we put that? And, okay, so maybe it's impossible to actually police or to enforce, but like, having it in the contract at least makes it a principle of the relationship. And I was like, yeah, I like it. I really like it. I think
paper policies definitely have some effect on people. I mean, some people don't give a shit what they sign, but a lot of people will read something and say, oh shit, I have to adhere to this. Because there's no, like, you can't enforce it, right? Like, what am I going to take you to court for not asking how I am or not caring about my answer? Like, no, but you're kind of putting it at the top of mind, sort of like, oh, that's an interesting thing to put in there. And I agree. I think that is very original. How effective it is, no clue, but I do like the idea. Yeah,
I think it makes it a point of, and I said to him, how does it work in practice? And he said, well, like, he said it doesn't often come up, but there was one time when he found out that one of the people he was working for was going through a particular crisis, and he backed off or changed to, gave them some time to deal with something like this. And it's not because of the contract, but because it was in the contract, it definitely made it something that he was more conscious of, even though he was the one that put it in the contract. So I like that. Maybe if that was in the agreements with boards, they wouldn't be able to say, well, we're sorry. We just
it's also a culture indicator. If a company says, no, I'm not going to do that, that's stupid, then you know where they stand. I think to the earlier point, though, the reason I'm sensitive to maybe the CEO or the investor side of it is because I've run companies and had to make hard hiring and firing decisions and deal with investors. And I very often hear like there really is a difference between like an employee mindset and a business owner mindset. And very often it's very easy for employees to say, oh, this is so fucked up. Why do they do that? And this is unfair. And why do they treat me? And if I was in charge, I would do blah, 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 which is earnest. I get it. And it makes sense from that perspective, but there's another perspective, and having seen the other side of it, it's not always straightforward.
That's fair. Fair.
All that said, there's a tremendous amount of corruption and malicious intent and terrible behavior and absolutely horrific incentives created by capitalism that encourages bad behavior, maybe more than it rewards it, at least to the extent that it should. So, it's a mixed bag.
Well, so the one example, which I can't remember, the reason I didn't mention it just now is because I couldn't quite remember the exact details, but there was a thing not too long ago about, it was a lot of Amazon workers were protesting about something, and it was like incontrovertible evidence, and every individual who spoke about it was like, yeah, well, of course they shouldn't be doing this. But then it was sent to the board with all this evidence, and the board voted against it. And the reason given was, well, it doesn't make financial sense. And it was like an overwhelming majority of the board as well. I think it was an anonymous vote, so you couldn't tell exactly who it was that was screwing over the employees. But it was so like black and white, so clear cut that the fact that like 90% of the board voted to do this horrible thing was just like, well, okay. And there was no recourse.
Whether the company is funded or not, and even more so whether a company is publicly traded or not, has a huge impact, like John said, on how those decisions are considered, for sure.
So that goes back to my thing about my friend. If the board had a responsibility to care, rather than just fiduciary, but an empathic responsibility, or maybe that would make a difference. I don't know.
That's to the extent they represent the investors, they won't. They care. They're there because they care about making ROI for their investors.
Well, okay, so then make the relationship with the investors have that written into the contract. You know.
Yeah. Well, so this is actually kind of relevant. There's the what do they call them? GSI or environment, governance, and ESG. What's the S? I don't remember what the S is. It's like the welfare or something. And in the U.S., Biden just vetoed a rule change that. There's a lot of double negatives. So basically, there's a rule that says investment funds are allowed to consider a company's ESG score, how they do on environmentalism, governance, and that, like, social. I should look up what ESG is. And so they tried to overturn that rule so that it didn't say they had to. It said they could if they wanted to, and they tried to take away that rule so that they couldn't even take that into account. And environmental, social and government. So I did have it right. I just wasn't confident in it. But it goes to your point, Peter. Like, why would you disallow somebody from considering those things? Because there's a financial incentive. That creates what it does is it creates a situation where companies have to think about that, which is going to cost them more money. So they don't want to allow it because they don't want to have to think about it. They want to remove it as a factor. Money is the worst incentive of all.
Oh, God. Now that's embarrassing. First time it's ever happened.
Yep. It's okay. Go ahead. Do you want to take it, Peter?
So embarrassing.
We're professionals here. What are you doing?
Okay, I'm putting my phone on silent. Oh my God, I can't believe that.
Submitting a
that's
complaint
like 500
to
episodes
HR,
that anyone's ever actually
you're
called.
doomed.
There goes our YouTube reviews. Fuck.
Right.
Show killer.
Okay, thanks guys. I think that signals the end of the episode. So I've got to call someone. Oh wait.